Next in.
Welcome to Next In. I am your host, Taylor Duncan. It is March 15th is when we're recording. We are just moving along. We're almost done with Q1 here. So that's why Jason probably has an incredible amount of anxiety as he's getting ready to close the quarter, same as myself and Shane. So co-host Shane, Shaun, and we're honored to have one of the masterminds behind Snowflake, right? That's how you described yourself, Jason. Now, sales engineering manager for Snowflake, which has just in the last maybe 5 years really taken over the cloud space by storm. Company that 5-10 years ago no one would have ever heard of, and now Snowflake is on everyone's minds. I'm just glad we don't actually have snow here like you probably do in Chicago, where I'm from. So Jason, thank you for joining us today. Again, Jason, sales engineering manager. So that's kind of a mouthful, a little bit different, but tell us your story. Tell us a little bit about really what does a sales engineering manager at Snowflake do and how you got there?
Yeah, so I have kind of an interesting story. I grew up in Franklin, Tennessee, mainly working in companies around Middle Tennessee, and I ended up working in a lot of healthcare companies, so workman's comp, PPO, medical malpractice, reinsurance and brokerage. But the last company that I was at, I was kind of recruited to Oracle to be a sales engineer. They were building out a new general business and national accounts sales engineering team for core technology, which is the primary technology behind the Oracle database and integration and security and all their engineered systems and things like that. And now that's been moved over to the cloud. So left the insurance business and healthcare and went to Oracle and worked there for a number of different years. I had several different roles there. I started out as a database sales engineer, and that only had that role for about a year. And then after that, they transitioned all the core tech database sales engineers into enterprise cloud architects. And so I worked as an enterprise cloud architect for about 3 years, covering accounts in Tennessee. And then after that, I got promoted into a new role, and that was enterprise cloud architect manager for the Mid-Atlantic for national accounts. And so I had engineers from Maryland all the way down to South Carolina and across Tennessee. So there are 11 individuals on that team. And I did that for about a year, and then Snowflake came calling. I had never heard of Snowflake when they reached out to me, and what the recruiter told me, and like, that sounds too good to be true. And so I actually set out to disprove what that recruiter was telling me, because he called me on a Saturday morning and I was about to go to the gym, and I was kind of bothered because he interrupted my plan. So, but I did take the call, and like, okay, well, I'm going to check this out, and we'll talk to you later. And I started researching Snowflake, and like, oh my gosh, they are building something that's triply redundant across a region in the cloud of your choice. And the guys that are building Snowflake, they were at Oracle, and they were on the dedicated engineered systems team reporting to the founder of Oracle, Larry Ellison. And these guys had over 100 database patents between them in their time at Oracle. And here they go again, reinventing themselves on the cloud, making a data cloud using only commodity cloud services of the cloud provider, and rolling it out in a business model where the customers only pay for what they use. How about that? And oh, by the way, there's nothing for you to manage.
Which is incredible. And I would imagine you as an architect over at Oracle, you're like, this is hitting so many of my pain points. Like, I'm so annoyed with 90% of the things that this company is going out to solve. It's just like, not only take my headache away, but let me join the tribe and be a part of the solution in the future. Is that what was kind of ringing in the back of your head?
Yeah. So I actually prided myself at Oracle in being able to solve problems with tons of different solutions and fit all these different hardware and software and cloud technologies together to build an integrated platform. Snowflake already had that. And so like, okay, I'm going from the hard button to the incredibly easy button is this something I really want to do? Because I kind of like managing all this complexity. And I thought about it a lot and thought really hard about it and said, okay, I'll go back and be an individual contributor as a sales engineer at Snowflake and kind of learn what this thing can do. It was hard at first. When I first started as a sales engineer, we only had 2 customers in Tennessee. And so now we have way more than that.
You have 3?
I've actually lost count. And so we've got federal and state, local education. We've got every vertical industry you could possibly imagine. But, kind of coming full circle to your original question of like, what is a sales engineer? What is a sales engineering manager? I kind of look at a sales engineer in 2 main pieces. Number 1, sales. That's the first part of the title. And number 2 is engineer. So it's kind of a 50-50 role. I do see that most of the sales engineers end up gravitating more towards the technical side. But the sales side is still very important. So we have to be able to align business value to the solutions that we're actually representing for Snowflake. The one thing that's been really interesting to me to watch is when I started at Snowflake, we only supported 2 workloads. Those workloads were data warehousing and data lake. Well, shortly after I started, we moved over onto Azure regions. We were already on AWS. And we had plans to move on to the Google Cloud. After data engineering, after we added data lake and data warehouse, and then added data engineering to ingest data into Snowflake in a near infinite manner in real time. And then from there, it started spreading out even more. Like, okay, what else can we do with this thing? How about data sharing without moving data? The ability to query data across the cloud, regardless of which cloud you're running on, and not having to move that data or manage that data in other places, and still having all the data governance and security and compliance and regulatory things covered no matter where you are. So GDPR in Europe, CCPA in California, HIPAA if you're in healthcare. And so I mentioned I started my career kind of in the healthcare IT space. I had a bunch of healthcare customers when I was at Oracle, and I have a bunch of healthcare customers here at Snowflake. And I moved into a leadership role again starting in February with our new fiscal year. And so I manage an engineering team. I say we cover Maine to Miami and across the Mississippi. So that's where we're sitting. We're covering healthcare and life sciences. And we really believe that Snowflake's going to be the backbone between a lot of the things that happen between payers and providers, and even, if you think about what happened with COVID-19, the distribution of the Pfizer vaccine, and Pfizer is one of our biggest customers, for example.
Yeah, and I think that you guys are at the forefront of like revolutionizing an industry that's still pretty old, right? Like a lot of people are trying to tackle this life science, healthcare industry, and it's a lot of it's so old. It's like, how do you do that? And so by, I don't know, lifting and shifting and getting people up into the cloud and getting people into a consolidated area with data share where you can have access not only to your own data, but I remember Snowflake also allows you to access, shared entities in a secure environment that might be multiple hospitals being like, hey, let's open source this stuff and let's share this and have a collective thought within the collective of Snowflake, which I think is pretty impressive and kind of awesome that you guys are doing that. But I want to take another step back real quick because, part of what we're on here to kind of achieve too is like, there are a lot of engineers potentially like you back in 2017 or 2007 to 2013 where, they were database administrators just like you. And then eventually you gravitated towards doing this, solution architect thing, and then eventually got into sales engineering. I'm curious as to like what happened to get you to go through that path, right? And there are probably a lot of people that eventually will be on Snowflake's sales engineering team that had a similar background as you. But like, how does somebody make that transition from pure engineer to potentially gravitate towards a sales engineering type of role?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually went to the University of Richmond and I was a management systems major. So I kind of looked at myself as kind of a hybrid all the way back then in college because I didn't want to be like a straight coder type person in computer science and the School of Arts and Sciences. I always had a major interest in business. And so I was thinking about the harmony of, IT and business and providing value at that point just to my customer, who was, finance people, accountants, HR, whomever I'm supporting as an IT professional. But one thing I always did along with my career is get involved with business teams. And so very early on, just requirements gathering, that sort of thing. But later on, many of the insurance healthcare companies that I worked for, they had they were thinking ahead and said, okay, let's look at people across our organizations, regardless of what job they may be doing today, where can they add value somewhere else? So when I was working for a medical malpractice insurance company, I actually worked on a team that looked at mergers and acquisitions. Now that seems like a crazy idea for someone who's the database administrator for the company, right? Well, the next insurance company that I worked for, I was on another team where they were looking for insurance leaders, and I got a bunch of insurance certifications and things like that. But what ends up happening is if you start involving yourself with the operations of the business, and you start seeing how the technologies can help move that business forward and make the company more money or save them some money somewhere else, then all of a sudden those things start coming together pretty quickly. I network as much as I possibly can. I've gotten involved recently with the board at Belmont University in Nashville for business systems analytics. And there's tons of IT professionals that went to Belmont or are executives here in the Nashville area that collaborate on a regular basis on doing good. And so there's all sorts of even free things that we can do with data that can help others. So I actually helped a company down in Atlanta last year. They are a nonprofit, and they work to solve world hunger and poverty issues. Well, they're doing their analytics on Snowflake, and what's been happening with the political unrest in Europe, and I know we're supposed to stay away from politics, but let's just say they're able to use data to try to figure out how to logistically get the supplies of where they need to be to help on a humanitarian effort. And that's kind of like if you want to back all the way up to the business world of well, how did Pfizer get all those vaccines out so quickly, and how did they figure out how to distribute all those things when they had to keep the vaccines at a certain temperature? Well, they did that by way of a data share that they could let the logistics companies tap into. And these logistics companies, some of them were running Snowflake and some of them weren't. And that's okay, because once you have access, that's the correct secured access to your data on the cloud, these insights can be unlocked immediately, and you can start not only making real-time decisions, but how about more predictive decisions and get ahead of what's coming. And so this year, we believe our data science workloads, which we've been going to market with pretty heavily last year and coming into this year, are going to really take off with the growth of Snowflake.
So the moral of this whole story and all of it really is, when a recruiter calls, answer the phone. Like, that's all I heard, right? Saturday morning,
that's pretty much it.
Going to the gym, recruiter calls, answer the call, because they probably got good news. All right, so cool, I got that. So you're this sales engineering. Now you're in the management role, and a lot of what we like to talk about is the things that you look for from a hiring manager standpoint. What do you look for on a resume, and what do you look for in an interview, and what makes the person? Because right now, I don't know, I guess I'll give you the advertising space here. Are you personally hiring for people on your team right now?
Mm-hmm. I'm personally hiring in the Philly market and the Boston market.
All right. So the Philly market and the Boston market, you're looking to bring on people. So what do you look for in a sales engineer? Do they have to have an engineering educational background? I know you have a management systems background or MIS background or whatever. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that's a prerequisite? Someone has to have engineering technical skills, or what do you look for when you're looking to bring on a sales engineer, this 50-50 role?
I look for aptitude first. And so no candidate is going to have everything that we need. And the reason for that is because over the years, especially, this happened kind of like with the Sarbanes-Oxley compliance kind of stuff and segregation of duties. Well, if you talk to an IT professional today, they're going to be highly specialized in something, right? They're going to be a cloud architect, or they're going to be, in the old days, like a storage engineer or a database administrator and things. But now the cloud's changed all that, because the cloud is doing a lot of that stuff for you. And so now you're looking at things in a totally different manner. So when I got in this role at first, I started looking to hire folks that were already doing healthcare IT work. But what I found very quickly was a lot of them, because of being so specialized in one thing, like I'm a data engineer, and so I concentrate on ETL and CDC and streaming of data from OLTP systems into enterprise data warehouse and data marts or data lakes, right? And so that's their one job role. Well, then someone else, some BI person, is going to be the one that's setting up, all the reporting and the dashboarding and things like that. I'm like, well, how do I find the person that can go end to end and cover all that? And then, oh yeah, by the way, they know cloud architecture for Google and Amazon and Microsoft, and now they know something about healthcare. So like what I do is I look for the best of these. Of the qualities that I can get as many as I can. I mean, I started again coming in mainly as a database administrator and a Oracle Cloud architect. But that's pretty specialized. I did not know data science yet. So I could cover data lake, data engineering, and I had, honestly, most of my background was in OLTP processing. And that's some area that we're investing heavily in Snowflake this year too. And so that's going to be yet another motion for us as we introduce hybrid tables. So whenever we do anything at Snowflake, it has to be seamless. We're not piecing services together. We're providing a platform that supports more types of workloads, such as last year we released unstructured file support. So now if we think about the medical space, I have a gentleman on my team up in New Jersey, and he wrote a demo very quickly that he's presenting at the HIMSS conference this week on processing DICOM images for healthcare. And I have another gentleman on my previous team, and he wrote a demo really quickly where he streamed dictation notes in from doctors and hospitals and had them automatically processed in Snowflake to create PDFs with secured shares that came out kind of like a DocuSign. So, I mean, there's all sorts of things that folks can do. And I asked them, how long did it take you to make that little PDF application? Oh, I just fooled around with a few hours on a Sunday night. I'm like, okay. So, I mean, the things that we used to do that took years are not taking even months. They're taking weeks or less in some cases.
So if I had to take what I heard from you, right, because there's a lot that you just said, right? And if I had to try to simplify that down into like a more consumable kind of thing, is it's just like, we need somebody that knows enough about a niche to be dangerous, to also recognize that there's other things out there that can make your life simpler. So it's like, I understand my domain, but I also understand that there's all these other people that are trying to stitch together these unspecialized things or specialized things in nature. And it's just like, we've got to be able to blend those all together and have conversations about all of it and be in depth enough to understand that one portion works. But I guess that still leads us to believe that we still want somebody with like an engineering background or a solution architect background, or somebody that can understand, like, I might not write code, I might not write scripts, but I at least have done I've had some sort of background in solution architecture in general. Because, for example, AWS has a bunch of people that don't have engineering degrees, but they can at least, whiteboard a solution up and have a high level conversation about stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look at like technical certifications. So have they gotten any certifications on any kind of data platform, even our competitors or other OLTP systems, or have they gotten any kind of cloud architecture certifications, those types of things? But we're taking like some of the engineers that I'm looking at now to hiring. Some of them were actually in the medical field and have kind of adapted to technology, because you think about how much technology is embedded in our health systems today. It's unbelievable. I mean, think about the all of those high-end machines that are streaming out IoT data constantly that has to be analyzed. And think about running analytics against all of this IoT data to figure out, where there could be some bad outcomes that if we don't watch certain things, because they're starting to figure out anomalies in health data very quickly, and how we can do some preventative things up front. There's a demo that someone else wrote on our left coast sales engineering team, and they did a big analysis on people just showing up for their doctor's appointments. And doctors don't want the person that just comes every time something's wrong, because by then they could have prevented something that, maybe a year or two and cut it off right before it actually became a problem. So
it's kind of like I had a buddy that is running a POC that they got funding for, where it was just measuring, like it was people that were diabetic and measuring the color of their pee in their urinals or whatever, or like in their toilets, and measuring the color. And then, like, as soon as it became an issue, it would ding their phone and say, hey, you need to go to the doctor and go see somebody because of the color and things like that, where you're running scripts that are running all of this data. And it's like, how do you consume that data to allow it to hit an alert system? So somebody that might've worked on that.
Maybe they just ate a lot of asparagus. How do you know?
Yeah, I mean, that actually does fit into so that demo was called Social Determinants of Health. And they can take all the analytics. So they'll have the demographic information, because they're going to kind of know, gender, age, all those types of things. They know where you live. One of the things they talked about too is, we've seen, kind of like you've heard probably in the news, like food deserts area where you can't get healthy food. Well, they're saying there's becoming more healthcare deserts too, because a lot of the hospital systems have kind of, merged together and things, and they're mainly in the highly populated areas of the country. And so a lot of rural hospitals, especially the smaller ones that weren't in any form of other health system, they failed financially and have shut their doors. And so now people are traveling further to get to healthcare, and then you're having, bad outcomes and things. So like, well, I don't really feel like I need to drive 50 miles one way to get to a doctor's appointment, right, for a physical. I don't feel like anything's wrong with me right now.
It's telehealth, right? Why telehealth's becoming more and more in demand.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So you've mentioned a lot on the engineering side. What about on the sales side? Because your background, there isn't like a strict, hey, I was in direct sales at X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
It was database administrator, cloud architect, etc. So when you're sitting down with someone and you're reviewing their resume or whatever, you mentioned you had people who came from the healthcare space and so on. Do you look for a strong sales background or just strong communication skills?
It's actually probably more communication skills, because if they have the communication skills, then they have the aptitude to become a good seller, and they can get down our messaging. So, as I talk to candidates, I kind of have like a phased approach for how they can, eventually be onboarded at the Snowflake. First thing I do is I just kind of talk to them and see if they're a culture fit. Are they going to fit on this team? Are they going to fit at Snowflake? Do they have do their values align with the values of Snowflake? Where they want to take their career, does that align with the vision statement, mission statement, things of Snowflake? The answer is that's yes. Then I'll pass them off to another engineer and have them do a quick technical assessment of them. So there's going to be some area of data where they're going to be kind of specialized in something in data, or maybe a couple different major types of workloads. They get through that, I'll start having them align with a sales account executive and a sales regional manager or district manager, and see if they're going to be a good fit with the sales leadership and the sales account executive that they're going to be paired with. I mean, the truth is, the sales engineer spends more time with their two account executives than they do any other people at Snowflake. Not their manager, not their peer engineers. It's their two account executives. They are partners. They equally own it. The sales engineer has to achieve the technical win and align to the business value, and then the account executive, of course, is being more of the person of the messaging of the business value and things too. But they're co-sellers, and we have so many meetings here at Snowflake that a lot of times we have to divide and conquer. So if I think the meeting is going to be more technical, then it's probably something for a sales engineer to go to. If it's going to be more on business value discussion or contracts, legal, getting security compliance documentation or any of that kind of stuff. That's going to be more on the sales side. However, the sales account executive has to be familiar enough with what the engineer is doing to make sure they're properly aligned on all the little steps that have to happen along the journey before they can become a capacity customer with Snowflake. Same time, there are questions that are going to be coming up on the technical side that will overlap inevitably with the sales piece. And so we do like to have the sales engineer and the account executive on meetings together and kind of co-present, know who's owning what, and kind of speak through, their part of the story. So to get to the end of the hiring process at Snowflake, what we like to do is have a panel interview where they put all this together. So they've spent about half their time in the interviewing doing technical stuff and about half their time doing sales stuff. And then they're going to, probably have some kind of, fake discovery session of a fake customer that we're making up for a specific use case. They come forward and they present that in front of a panel. And the panel is made up of all the individuals that they interview with up until this point. And then they'll be evaluated and, we'll decide where to go from there.
So do you find in that whole process, if you could give advice to someone, because again, there's got to be 3 or 4 million people listening who are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to apply. I'm going to reach out to Jason right now. Do you see something that's like a pretty common pitfall that there are people who do X, Y, and Z, and it's, on paper, everything looked good until you see something that's pretty common?
Yeah, that happens quite a bit. So we do a lot of coaching here at Snowflake. And so we coach you through the hiring process. And do you listen to what we tell you to do and follow it? Or do you go off in your own direction? And you would be surprised how many people go off in their own direction. But the people who listen and follow it, they usually do pretty well. We've had other people that do awesome on their one-on-one interviews, and then they get to the panel and they get pretty nervous. I mean, there's 4 or 5 people staring back at them from that Zoom, window, and it's pretty nerve-wracking when we used to do that in person too, and be in one conference room where you could have like a sales vice president and you could have other engineers that could be asking you questions, and they're going through this role play. That's a hard thing to get through. In fact, I think that kind of situation could be harder to get through than even just a normal meeting that you're going to have with customers or internally, here at Snowflake. But ultimately, if they, especially in that final panel interview, if they value each of the personas that are in that interview equally and they pay attention to their needs, because they're going to, as they're in their role play, they're going to start throwing out nuggets of information that they want you to latch onto and catch on to. That is kind of, because in sales engineering and in sales, we are always in a discovery process because we're looking at net new workloads, getting wider, more use cases, bringing more people onto the platform, that sort of thing. And so
you're looking for people that are like active listeners. It's like they're when you throw a nugget out there, are they actively engaged enough to grasp onto a nugget that's released at any one given point in time, where it's just like, okay, well, now we're giving you the nugget. Did you hear it? And did you hear what you need to talk about, or did you overlook it? And overlooking the nuggets is the biggest problem, where people are walking into a call where they're like, I'm going to wait for my specialty to show up, what I'm comfortable to talk about, and I'll talk about the thing I'm comfortable talking about. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and overlook everything else you're about to say. And that becomes a negative attribute in the interview process, which is like,
I heard the same thing.
Comfortability things.
That's what I hear too. Like I'm got my recruiter hat on here going, if Snowflake's our client and we work with you and you tell us this, if we have a candidate who's going into this final panel, one of the things we would do in our coaching of going, what we know from Snowflake is really they're looking for someone who's a great listener. So make sure when you're in this final panel, nerves are going to be there. Quiet those and open your ears, because everyone's going to say something you need to hear. Don't go in with, all right, here's my solution. I'm ready. I've spent 3 hours preparing for this. Here's my agenda. Because in reality, really, Jason's going to be listening or looking for you to listen to when he gives you a small nugget. Do you grab a hold of that and kind of run with it? Because in a lot of ways that also sort of strokes Jason's ego that you were listening to him and sales vice president and engineer. They like hearing that someone listened and kind of shifted directions even slightly to go, here, let me give you my solution to what you just said, versus just going, here's my presentation, I'm done, don't keep asking me questions, I'm just going to keep trying to ram through what I came in here with my agenda.
And let's be real, there's so many times where any of us, like probably all three of us, have been in a sales meeting where we went in prepped with all of this stuff, and we're like, yes, this is what we're going to talk about, and then that meeting went totally sideways and we ended up talking about something 180 degrees different than what the expectations were and what we came prepared with, our booklets, our templates, our all of our data. And then we're like, oh, now I got to listen. I got to go figure some stuff out. We're going to write this all down. I'll get back to you guys later.
Yeah, you have to be flexible and expect curveballs. So there's one leader here, when he comes into a panel interview, he likes to play a C-level persona. And when he comes in 5 minutes late every time, and then he says, the presentation's already started and we've already gone through intros, and he wants to back up and get his stuff out, and then be mad the whole time and behind and ask crazy questions. But what it ends up, one of the pitfalls I see happen is that the engineers, when interviewing them, I usually play the role of a data engineer on the call, because I want to see if they're just going to talk to me, because that's where they're going to be the most comfortable. If they don't start talking to that C-level, he's the one who's going to be buying the solution. And if you tick him off, I mean,
it's like,
good luck.
I see you, but I don't see you. I'm going to look him in the eyes. It's like,
I want to sit in on one of these. I want to see what this C-level person does. He sit down. He's like, I know I'm 5 minutes late, but if you were a sandwich, what kind of sandwich would you be and why? Go.
Like, no, he didn't do that. Yeah, get him the questions, but we also will throw out questions that we know they don't know the answer to. And it's not like a hard technical question to stump them. It's like, tell me about your limits of liability. I mean, what can y'all do with that? Or they'll say something like, can we get some pricing? And it's only the sales engineer that's on the interview. So of course you can't get pricing from the sales engineer.
It's $10,000 per megawatt. Go.
Yeah. So we want to see how they are able to deflect but never leave those on the panel and feeling like they didn't care about them, that they're covering all their needs for sure.
That's awesome. So from a you mentioned culture standpoint and so on, if we are going to like talk about Snowflake and what you do, what is it that is, obviously the technology speaks for itself, right? And like you said, Snowflake, as of, was it 4 or 5 years ago, you had never even heard of them. And then you find out, oh my gosh, like this isn't, and that wasn't some fake story. That was very true and real of like, whoa, this is outrageous stuff. And that's why Snowflake has gone from no one's heard of it to pretty much anyone who understands cloud knows everything about what's going on with Snowflake. So that's obviously the technology, but from a culture standpoint, what's so awesome about working at Snowflake, working on your team, et cetera? How do you pride yourself on the culture side of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that's most important to us is never losing our culture. So I think I was like the 522nd employee hire here. And now we got, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000. I lose track. I mean, we hired 300 and something sales engineers in Q4, and we're hiring like another 50 to 75, depending how many we can get in the door this quarter. So, I mean, we're constantly hiring. And so they tell us that even if you don't have open headcount today, I mean, I mentioned already I have two. They say keep on recruiting because you will have more headcount open up later this year. So we split, if not once or twice per year. And so when I interview candidates, I actually tell them, don't interview me, interview Snowflake, because this is going to have to be a culture fit for you, because I'm most likely not going to be your manager next year. In fact, I might not even be your manager at some point later this year. So make sure this is the right place for you. There are a couple of our key values that I think about constantly as I work here, and it's integrity always, and put customers first, but it's really put others first no matter what. And so we work very well together across our teams. We did have a culture of being very much in person and in the office before COVID, but being 100% cloud company when we got sent home, it wasn't a problem for us. We didn't miss a beat. In fact, that's when our exponential growth really took off. So our integrity, obviously, when you hire that many new people, I mean, our core values and in our mission statement and our culture and all that stuff with new people, it can change. So we have to work really, really, really hard to have that startup mentality and still keep behaving like the little Snowflake of 4 and 5 years ago.
Yeah, and to continue to fight, but I think that's what makes Snowflake pretty successful, right? It is the people, it is the culture, and that's how you're able to sort of like the story of Boston Beer Company, right? The Sam Adams brew, even though it's a huge macro brew, they try to act like the micro brew, right? They still try to be the cool small startup, like you said, even though they've gotten well past that small craft beer company that they were maybe 30 years ago. They still try to be the craft beer company, and they're really not any longer. But that's, so you're saying Snowflake's culture is really tries to keep it engaging and startup like, even though now you guys are no, you're definitely not a, startup in the traditional senses, right?
Right.
So so how can people get in touch with you? Let's say that people are going, hey, I really want to join Snowflake. What do they do?
Yeah, so the best thing to do, honestly, is go to snowflake.com/careers. And there's a search there to find roles that you may want to apply for. Most in sales are remote, except for the corporate positions. But we also have programs for those that that maybe don't have the right background. So internally, and we offer this now externally, we have a program called Snowmaker. So it's a 6-month program to learn how to become a sales engineer from knowing nothing about it to begin with. So we've taken other candidates from other regular, non-IT type positions all over our company and said, you know what, I want to give this sales engineering thing a try. And you need to get sponsored by a team that would bring you on and go through this program for about 6 months. If you might find out that it's not for you, and that, or you don't have the right aptitude, you don't like it, whatever it is. But most have made it through and have been very excited to do it. It used to be that, when we were hiring like senior level and higher type engineers here, we're talking to engineers that had like 20 plus years data background. It's not like that anymore. And there are kids coming out of college now and that are so much better off for this new world that we're in with cloud. It would have taken me, it took me decades to get to where a lot of these kids are very, very quickly out of starting gates with the way they're learning now with all these new agile methodologies and things.
Oh, decades. Come on. You're only 31?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, me too. I'm in my late 20s. So let's transition here, have a little bit of fun. You're in Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
Shane and I are currently located in Brentwood, so we're about 10 minutes from you. So full transparency, we all live in a pretty close proximity. What is your favorite thing to do in the Nashville area? Give us an activity to do this coming weekend, which hopefully should be pretty nice weather.
Yeah, I'm an avid sports fan, but I'll leave that aside for all of our professional teams. But I love dining out, and Nashville's got a pretty good food scene.
Favorite place? Go.
So what place?
You know what? I'm kind of on a mission to find new places now. I tend to go to what's most convenient to me around the Cool Springs area in Franklin, just because I work a lot and I need to eat pretty fast. So, but if I had time to explore, I would probably try to find something else like in the Germantown area or East Nashville that's got some kind of outside venue.
What was your most recent favorite place, even if you don't want to call it your favorite place?
You know what? I haven't explored as much as I used to during COVID because Nashville is more kind of locked down. I've been kind of researching where I want to hit.
I can tell you not to go to Chef and I if you want a place to right off the list. That was very high on our list.
I've actually enjoyed, so I go to a lot of hockey games, and my wife and I will go eat at Eddie V's before a hockey game and then just walk across from the arena. So that works out pretty well.
BBQ?
I've had a lot of, anytime you want to go to Fifth and Broad and just try something else, they have absolutely everything. from the original Princess Hot Chicken, which is below. I mean, then below you've got the touristy Hattie B's. So, and that Hattie B's looks just as crazy as the one they put in Vegas. So,
question, because you are one of the originals. You're not a transplant here to Nashville.
mhm.
You're right from the area. Is it Mojo's Tacos or Mojo's Tacos?
I honestly don't know.
Over in the factory.
I would go with Mojo's.
Yeah, I go with Mojo's. So that's my spot. I'm going to Mojo's, and then I'm getting a 100-layer donut from Five Daughters Donuts. And when we have family or friends in town, we take them to those spots. There's mine, and I'm definitely got the best.
You know, it's a shame that the pharmacy didn't end up building in there. They were going to have a beer garden in there, and it didn't work out.
Are they going to? Because the factory was purchased, and they're redesigning the whole thing in like the next year or two to have like numerous beer garden-esque outdoor stuff. That happened like 2 months ago. Maybe
it's going to get have a second shot at it, because it was some kind of weird, the water tower.
Yeah.
Well, I think the original beer garden was going to kind of be around it, maybe underneath it, part of it. And they're like, oh, we're not so sure this thing is going to
it's a little rusty, a little old. Maybe that wouldn't make the best news story.
It's over 100 years old, probably.
Yeah. All right. So, you like eating out. Is there any activities? So you mentioned go to a Preds game.
Mm-hmm.
So I would agree. I'm from Chicago. I'm used to Blackhawks games. Preds games are awesome because when you go to Bridgestone Arena, you empty out. You're right onto Broadway. It's like, it's I think one of the coolest locations for that large of a venue. I think it's fantastic. So Bridgestone Arena. All right. So last question here, because we've stolen a lot of your time. And like you said, you're a busy man. What is your favorite movie?
Favorite movie? I think I'm going to go with Hoosiers.
Oh,
that's a good one.
That's a classic. But you're not from Indiana. I'm surprised. It's like you get that from Indiana.
High school basketball, and when I was in middle school, my middle school basketball coach, who later became my assistant varsity coach, he would play different scenes from the movie before we were going to go play, kind of like his motivation, and so that to fire us up, and I think it worked.
Yeah, so you're an alumnus from Battleground Academy, so shout out BGA, and look at what you've done. Look at what you've created. A Snowflake sales engineering manager. So Jason, thank you so much for joining us, telling us all about Snowflake. Again, how can people get in touch with you? Specifically, maybe on LinkedIn, or what can they do?
LinkedIn's probably the easiest way. I'm easy to find. Jason Shull, Shull. So,
all right. So go check out Jason. Go check out Snowflake. It was snowflake.com/careers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and Jason is looking for sales engineers. As crazy as it is, how many people did you say in Q4 that you guys brought on?
Over 300 sales engineers.
That's outrageous. We are happy to help. So, again, thank you so much, Jason, for just kind of telling us your story, how you got there, giving out some advice. I love the Snowflake story. Again, talk about a company that really in a very short period of time put themselves on the map because they have incredible technology. So thank you for joining us. And thank you for telling us all about Nashville. So everyone else, have a great week.
Next in.